All right, class, welcome back from lunch. I hope you guys all had a really good time. So we're going to, this afternoon, continue our unit on the road to the American Revolutionary War. And today we're going to be talking about an event that happened called the Boston Massacre. And as good history detectives do, we're going to be looking at this event just like police officers look at crime scenes. So we're going to be looking at some information up close, and we're going to be looking for evidence, and we're going to be asking a lot of questions about what we're looking at, just like police officers do. So the first thing, the big question, what we're going to be really talking about today is who was at fault. This is an event that took place that really was a big fight that happened. So there was the colonists and the British troops, and they got into a fight in Boston. And there was a lot of information that was written about this event from both sides. And so I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to look at both sides of this event and figure out for yourselves who caused it, who started this fight, who's the ones to blame. So in just a second, I'm going to give you guys a lot of information about the Boston Massacre. But then after that, what we're going to be doing in small groups is looking at primary source documents. These were, we'll talk more about primary source documents, but these are documents that were written right after this happened. And so these are true voices of people who were there and what they saw and what they heard. We, in our groups, will be presenting some of the evidence that we find from those primary source documents. And then I will give each one of you guys the opportunity to determine, based on all of the evidence that you hear, who you think is at fault for this event. So first, what we're going to do is just read a quick chapter that will give you guys some background information on the Boston Massacre. But before I do that, I want to just talk a little bit about what we've already learned. And in the last couple of, on Monday and Tuesday, we talked about what was happening in the United States during this time. There was a lot of changes politically that we talked about. There was some new ideas from our colonists on how they wanted to live their lives. They wanted to be free. They wanted to pursue their own businesses. They wanted to pursue their own forms of religion. We also talked about what the British were doing during this time too, and that was, yesterday we talked about the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act and all of these new taxes that the British government was putting on the colonists and how it made them feel. So I want you guys to be thinking in your minds about what we learned yesterday with those different acts. So let's read real quickly here about the Boston Massacre. This is a book called The Boston Massacre, and the author's name is Michael Bergan. We're just going to read this first chapter here that kind of gives you guys just some background information on what exactly happened that night. People in Boston, Massachusetts were unhappy. Since 1765, the city had been the center of protests against the British for the taxes it charged its 13 American colonies. British leaders decided they needed to send troops to protect government officials there and to restore order. In 1768, British soldiers arrived in Boston Harbor and camped in the city. The troops' arrival angered many Bostonians. The British had never placed troops in the city before. To many residents, the soldiers were another sign that Parliament did not respect the colonists' rights. Some Bostonians began insulting the troops when they saw them in the streets. At times, fistfights erupted between the colonists and these British troops. Let's go back and just look at this picture real quick. Another picture. The gentlemen in red are the British troops, and the other in blue are the American colonists. On March 5th, 1770, the hatred some Bostonians felt towards the British soldiers led to violence and turned deadly. A mob insulted a British guard, then threw snowballs at him. As the crowd grew, more troops arrived to help the soldier. One soldier fired his gun. Both citizens and the soldiers shouted, and several more shots followed. In the end, the British killed 5 Boston residents and wounded 6 more. The citizens of Boston called the bloodshed the Boston Massacre. Samuel Adams was the leader of the residents who opposed the British. he tried to use the massacre to convince more colonists to hate the British officials. Okay, so that's just some basic information on what happened that night. Let's go back to our presentation here. Okay, so like I was saying, we're going to be looking at both sides of this fight, and we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of the colonists and also the perspective of the British troops. So in a couple of minutes, what's going to happen is I'm going to break you guys out into 7 different small groups, and each one of you is going to get a primary source document. So we've used primary source documents before, and I think some of you probably remember that these are documents that were created right during this period of history, and they were created by the people who were there. A lot of times it's newspaper accounts, it's drawings, it's journal entries, and we've looked at a whole bunch of different types of primary source documents. So you guys are going to get a good sampling of a bunch of different things today. While you guys are looking at the document that I give to your small group, I want you guys to be looking very, very closely at the information that's in there. I want you guys to be thinking about what that information tells you about the event. And remember, our big question is, who was at fault? And be trying to find stuff that's going to help you support your argument. I also want to make sure that you guys know that you might only get information that's going to support one side or the other, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But just make sure that you're finding good evidence. Before we hop into that information, I want to make sure that we go over some of our key vocabulary for this lesson, and we've already touched on a lot of these words. Boycotts, colonies, customs, we talked about all of these in our last few lessons. Economics, we talked about too. In some of your documents, you might see the words empire, monarch. Those words are referring to the British government. The monarch is the king of England. When they talk about those words, they're talking about the British government. I see that I have repeal on there twice, which I'm sure they wanted to repeal everything. The word sabotage is a word that we haven't really talked about yet, and we talked about the boycotts and some of the protests. But when somebody sabotages something, they're trying to ruin it, and that was certainly a strategy that our colonists used too. Okay, so it's time to kind of start breaking out into our groups, but before we do that, I just want to show you guys real quickly what I mean when I'm talking about primary source documents. These are just 3 samples of some of the groups. This is actually going to be what you guys get. So the first one is a report of the committee of the town of Boston. This is from the Patriot standpoint. Second group might have testimony from Bostonian William Tant, providing a view much less one-sided than the committee. So this is a colonist view of what happened, but not as biased. And then another group will get testimony from British Captain Thomas Preston. So this is a British point of view, and it's going to be very different than the other 2 that we just looked at. So again, there's 7 different small groups, and you guys are going to break out now. You guys can also see that the primary source documents are not very long, so there's a few questions on your page to help you guys go through the information. I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to go through, look at everything, read it, discuss the questions all together, and then, like I said, we're going to come back and have that discussion. Okay, so now that everybody is back, thank you. I was walking around listening to your conversations. I heard some really great discussions. So now it's time for you guys to decide who was at fault based on the information that we've all reviewed together. So real quickly, we're going to have each one of the groups share out some of the information, and I will be recording the evidence that you guys find on these 2 sheets. So we're going to hear from the colonists, and we'll hear from the British soldiers. And as we build our list, be thinking in your mind too, who do you think is at fault? You guys are going to do a quick write at the very end. Okay, time now to come to a conclusion. You guys have heard all of the evidence. You guys have heard the arguments from all of our different groups. I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes right now. On your own, you're going to be doing a quick write. So again, a quick write is when we write down our opinion. Our big question again was, who was at fault? That's the question I would like for you guys to answer. Be sure that you guys are giving me evidence from our presentations today. And I'm going to go back and put up our 2 sheets. We have the colonists and the British soldiers. Now I can't say it. And you guys can use any of the information on these 2 sheets to support your quick write. All right, thank you guys.